Senate will come to order. Senators will be in their seats. Clerk will call the roll.
Alley. Argabright. Billinger. Blasey. Blue. Bowers. Bowser. Clays from Saline. Clays from Sedgwick. Clifford. Corson. Dietrich. Erickson. Fagg. Faust-Goudot. Francisco. Gossage. Haley. Holscher. Klemp. Cluse. Masterson. Murphy. Owens. Peck. Peterson. Petty. Rose. Reichman. Schmidt. Schallenberger. Shane. Starnes. Sykes. Thomas. Thompson. Titus. Tyson. Ware. Warren.
Senators and guests, please rise and give prayerful attention to our guest chaplain, Doug Hinkle.
Let us pray. Loving God, thank you so much for each senator here. Thank you for deeply loving each one more than we could ever imagine. I acknowledge that you are sovereign and that you have brought every individual member of this body together for your specific purposes. Thank you that every senator has a God-given role to play and has been given the resources to play their role as your perfect plan is achieved in the Kansas Senate. Your perfect will be accomplished because of or in spite of every one of us. Father, I pray that it will be because of. In Jesus' name, amen. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
On a point of personal privilege, Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. President. We have some very special guests here in the President's Gallery behind you, and some, I believe, also in the West Gallery wearing purple. Many of them may have came to offices of senators today advocating for Senate Bill 88 and other legislation. They are representing the Alzheimer's Association. I think everybody in the Senate can relate somehow knowing somebody who battled that disease, and so they're advocating for better policy for all Kansans. I ask the Senate to give them a warm welcome. Thank you.
We have some page introductions. Senator from Montgomery, Senator Peck.
Thank you, Mr. President. I do have two gentlemen with me today who are serving as pages for the Senate. They attend Oswego High School. We've got Miles Deeker and Brandon Wary. One is a junior and one is a senior at Oswego High School. Gentlemen, thanks for serving this Kansas Senate today.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also have a couple of pages with me today. If you gentlemen would stand up, we have Oliver and William Davis. They're at Trail Ridge Middle School in Shawnee, and they've been helping me draft bills all day long, Mr. And I give them a big Senate welcome. Thank you, Mr. President.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I've got Ben Wymore with me today, serving it as a page. Ben is a 5th grader at Briarwood Elementary in the Shawnee Mission School District. Ben has done a great job. He's a tremendously talented young man, and I had a chance to meet Ben when I talked to his Boy Scout troop this fall. So thanks so much for being here, Ben, and thanks for your service. Thank you, Mr. President.
Gentlemen, welcome to the Senate. All right, please note references of bills on page 1 through 7 of the calendar. Chair recognizes the Majority Leader from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate resolve itself into the Committee of the Whole of the bills, for the consideration of bills in the calendar under the heading of General Orders.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Chair appoints the Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Erickson, to preside over the Committee of the Whole.
The Senate, having resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole, will now consider those items listed on the calendar under the heading of General Orders. We will now turn our attention to Senate Bill 4. The chair recognizes the Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson, to explain the bill.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 4 will seem familiar to many of you. This has been a discussion we've had for several years with regard to making sure that the election ballots have been received into the hands of the election officials by 7 p.m. on Election Day. So it eliminates the 3-day grace period, and it is as simple as that. Now we go back to 2017 when this grace period was first instituted in the state, and we had testimony in previous years from the chairman of that elections committee in the House of Representatives, who indicated that the primary concern at that time was the receipt of the military ballots and making sure that they get in on time. But the military ballots get 45 days to be received, and they have no grace period. They have to be received by 7 p.m. on Election Day like everyone else. If you vote in person on Election Day, or you vote in person advance, or you drop off your ballot in a drop box, you all have the same requirement. That has to be received by 7 p.m. The only exception we give are for those with those mail-in ballots. And that creates a situation where we continue to receive ballots for up to 3 days after the election has closed. And recently there was a court challenge in the Fifth Circuit, and it is deemed that the grace periods, no matter if it's 1, 3, 10, or 100 days, is unconstitutional. So that gives us additional justification for eliminating this 3-day grace period. If you haven't had an opportunity to read that opinion, it's full of very interesting facts. But one thing I might point out that Justice Kavanaugh, a Supreme Court justice, said, to state the obvious, a state cannot conduct an election without deadlines. A deadline is not unconstitutional merely because of voters' own failures to take timely steps to ensure their franchise. That was within that opinion. The other thing is, within this state, as we know, we have the ability for people to collect up to 10 ballots and deliver them to the election office on behalf of someone else. So if someone is in a nursing home or is unable to get that ballot to the election office or unable to vote in person, they have that opportunity. So with that, I will stand for questions.
Are there questions for the Senator from Johnson? Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Faust-Godot.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And if the Senator from Johnson would stand for a couple of questions.
He's standing.
Yes. Madam Chair, I served in the House of Representatives along with our Senator, our President of the Senate, Ty Masterson. He and I, and during that time, I served on the Elections Committee with now Secretary Scott Schwab, who was on the Elections Committee in the House. And then when I came over to the Senate, I served on the Elections Committee, and I somewhat still do. So I previously served on the Elections and the Ethics and Elections Committee, and now we look at a lot of voting bills in our Federal and State Affairs Committee, Madam Chair. And over the years, I've actually served under 3 or 4 different Secretary of States for the state of Kansas. I recall working on a bill with, at that time, Chris Kobach, who was Secretary of State. At that time, we were working to make it easier to vote. Madam Chair, I wouldn't be standing here today without votes as the first black woman to serve in the Kansas Senate. So voting, the right to vote, is so important to me. So I wanted to serve on the election committees. Madam Chair, you are a gentlelady from Wichita, Sedgwick County, where I represent, and I represent a big group of people with disabilities. Madam Chair, and I often, as the senator from Johnson mentioned, originally, I mean, yes, you can pick up advance ballots, 10 of them now. Originally in the committee, I think it was 3 or 5, and I had to say, Mr. Chairman, well, I've got 7 siblings, so do I need to make a decision who I might return their ballot? So it went up to 10. And so over the years, this body, this legislature has tried to make it easier to vote. I worked with Senator Ron Thurnberg back in the day, and the fundamental right to vote, Madam Chair. And so, again, people with disabilities. So when I ran for office, I ran to help the child, to fix the child in need of care system. I ran to help people with disabilities. Before my mother passed, she was in a wheelchair. So, Madam Chair, I most frequently visit the Cerebral Palsy Foundation in Wichita on 21st Street there, nearby Wichita State University. And I do a lot for the community of people who are in wheelchairs, homebound. And I would go and pick up their ballots and drop them off. However, Madam Chair, with the United States Postal Service, and I know this for a fact, that when we're in session, Madam Chair, I will mail my, to pay your credit card payment, right? They say mail in 7 days prior to the date that it's due, and hopefully it gets there by that date so you don't get a late fee, right? And however, sometimes when I've mailed from Topeka, I've always gotten a late fee. And so I learned not to do that anymore, because the mail, when you mail from Topeka, it goes to Kansas City first, and then it's rerouted. Even when I request Senate certificates, it takes a long time for that certificate to get from Topeka to Wichita. And so my question for the gentleman from Johnson is, so do we have a provision in there that will consider those people with permanent disabilities, that they have submitted a letter from their physician to receive that advance ballot in the mail? And so I love our military. My father served in the Korean War. So, and I know we do a lot of things, to say thank you to the men and women of our country. However, those Kansans, those citizens who are in wheelchairs, and they're in the bed, and they sometimes would call me and ask me, could I come to their house or wherever, and they would leave clipped outside. I mean, wow, they trusted me, Madam Chair. They would put $20 on a clothespin and put it on their mailbox for me to go buy them stamps to bring back to them so that they could put it on their advance ballot envelope and mail it so that their vote counted. And so, Mr. Chairman, I'm concerned about everyone's right to vote and their vote be counted. And Madam Chair, some of this body in here, we voted The majority of us voted except one person for the 3-day grace period because we understood how important it was for your vote to be counted. We understood that the mail service, you know, we've had some bad weather. I don't care how many planes or trains you have. You know, if it's bad weather, you just can't make it. You know, so the mail is delayed. So, Madam Chair, so for the senator from Johnson, is there any provision in there for our senior citizens and people with permanent disabilities to make sure that their mail-in ballot, their vote is counted?
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Well, the short answer is no, but this is a bill that very simply sets a uniform deadline for everyone. And again, I refer back to the Fifth Circuit Court's opinion. The opinion states this would allow voters to mail in their ballots in some cases. Well, let me back up just a little bit. The mail service allows everybody but the UOCAVA ballots to be recalled in the mail if they want to. So it does allow for extraordinary relief because it is possible you could potentially mail a ballot, because every mailbox now becomes a ballot box. You drop your ballot into that mail and you hope that it gets there in time. But it is theoretically possible, and one of the reasons they struck down the grace period in the case in the Fifth Circuit is because there's a possibility, potentially, that someone could vote after the close of election for everybody else. And so everyone has a responsibility, if they want to vote, to make sure their vote gets in. And if they want to vote, there are ways to do it, including this ballot collection that we allow up to 10 people. We certainly want everyone to be able to vote, but we also want a uniform end date. And that's what's important, and that's why I think they ruled the grace periods for anything to be unconstitutional. Of course, it has to go on up to the Supreme Court eventually to see, but that falls within that, all the, everything that happens in the judicial system. So, no, there's not a special provision for anyone, but there's not a special provision for almost anything. And with regard to the mail, we saw more advanced in-person voting this time in this state, primarily because people have lost confidence in the mail to get in. We sent a birthday card to a grandson. It took a month to get from Kansas City down to Dallas. And so if you want to make sure that your vote is counted, probably one of the least confident ways to do that would be to slap it in the mail these days. And I'm not trying to criticize the mail carriers or the mail workers. I'm just saying the system such as it is, where they reroute mail out of the state and back into the state, is inefficient, doesn't work. Our Senator Roger Marshall's been fighting that battle. And so if anyone is worried about that, then they can contact somebody to try to pick up their ballot. And I think that provision is already there in state law. So all we're doing is setting a uniform end time for the election for everyone. And that's the way it ought to be. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Faustigedo.
Madam Chair, one size doesn't fit all. And, you know, I needed to be here as a state lawmaker. I needed to be here at the Capitol yesterday. And I live in Wichita. If I didn't have a car, I couldn't have been here. So I needed that transportation to get here. And the senator from Johnson makes my point of the mail running late. And he continues to make my point of prior to, you could pick up 10 ballots and deliver them. Prior to that, you could pick up as many as you wanted to. That new law has the League of Women Voters, who are a nonpartisan organization of women fighting for the right to vote and fair and just laws. And they want Kansans, they want citizens to vote. And they were just out in the hall, in the rotunda on the first floor, when the mural went up, the women's suffrage mural of the right to vote. So, but those League of Women Women, that organization, they were afraid to even do voter registration because we've made it harder. We've enacted laws that says if you appear to be an election worker, you know, you're getting arrested or you're fined. And we limited it to 10. I have senior citizen homes in my district that if the senator says if you want your vote to count, if you want to vote, then, you know, get it in the mail. Again, if you don't have a stamp, if you don't have a vehicle, if your body is, you're disabled, you cannot drive, you are wheelchair bound, you're limited, your mobility is in that wheelchair or in that bed, but your mental state is still there and you want to vote. And you should have that right to vote, and your vote should be counted. Madam Chair, we've got election, tax season is coming up, right? And in Wichita, at the post offices there, they'll have, you can drop your tax letter in that mailbox by midnight so that it arrives there so that you can get a tax refund or pay your taxes. So something this significant that people died for the right to vote. And everybody's not the same. People with disabilities cannot just, you know, get up and get dressed and jump in their car and go to the, you know, to vote in person or to drop their ballot off, you know. And so over the years, we as lawmakers, we've made provisions, just like we're doing for the military. We need to be concerned about our seniors, and particularly, Madam Chair, about our people with permanent disabilities, that they need help getting where they go. They need a little grace. So with that, Madam Chair, I have an amendment to address and to try to help our people with disabilities vote.
Have you turned it in?
I have.
What is the number?
1103.
Give us a moment to get it distributed.
Thank you. David, look up. Thank you. I don't even know where my phone is. So, Oklahoma. Okay. Can you just write Oklahoma, New Jersey? What? You would think I would have a pen. Is that a pen? I don't have a. Why don't I ever have
Senator from Sedgwick, do you wish to explain your amendment or have it read?
Madam Chair, please have it read.
The reader will read.
Mr. President, I move to amend Senate Bill 4 on page 1, following line 5 by inserting, quote, Section 1, KSA 25-1123 is hereby amended to read as follows. 25-1123, Section A. When application for an advance voting ballot has been filed in accordance with KSA 25-1122 and amendments thereto, the county election officer shall transmit to the voter applying therefor one each of the appropriate ballots. Unless an advance voting ballot is transmitted in person pursuant to this subsection, the county election officer shall transmit the advance voting ballots to the voter at one of the following addresses as specified by the voter on such application. 1, the voter's residential address or mailing address as indicated on the registration list. 2, the voter's temporary residential address. Or 3, a medical care facility as defined in KSA 64-425 and amendments thereto. Psychiatric hospital, hospice, or adult care home where the voter resides. No advance voting ballot shall be transmitted by the county election officer by any means prior to the 45th day before the election for which an application for an advance voting ballot has been received by such county election officer. If the advance voting ballot is transmitted by mail, such ballot shall be transmitted with printed instructions prescribed by the Secretary of State and a ballot envelope bearing upon the outside a printed form as described in KSA 20. -1120 and amendments thereto, and the same number as the number of the ballot, unless the voter elects to deposit the advance voting ballot into a locked ballot box without an envelope. All ballots shall be transmitted to the advance voting voter not more than 45 days before the election, but within 2 business days of the receipt of such
If the
voting.
reader would pause for a minute. Senator from Sedgwick, I believe he's read the amended part. Do you wish for him to continue reading?
Madam Chair, where is the reader at now?
On page 2 in the first paragraph.
The reader is on page 2, I believe, about letter B.
Madam Chair, the reader can cease.
Thank you. So are there questions on the amendment? Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Yes, thank you, Madam Chair. This is such a dramatic change in the bill. It has not been debated in committee. This is what we were doing with this bill, is trying to set a uniform deadline, not looking out to how far in advance we can mail the ballots. And I do not feel like this is a friendly amendment. If we were to make changes of this nature, we should have a hearing. We should vet it. We should ask the Secretary of State's office. We should ask the local election officials what kind of an impact, both fiscally and physically, that would have on them. And so I don't, at this time, on this particular bill, I think it's just a bridge too far, and I cannot support this amendment. It's not friendly to the bill. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson. Yields to Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Fausto.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So all this amendment, I know it's a lot of verbiage here, but all it does is currently, and I did speak to my election commissioner in Sedgwick County, and I talked to the Secretary of State's office, and I talked to those who deal with voting issues on this amendment, and this was not a bill. So when he talks about having a hearing, it's not a bill I introduced and, oh, we didn't have a hearing. All it does, Madam Chair, is currently the election office will mail your ballot out 20 days prior to the election. And I'm saying, with the United States Postal Service running the way that it does, and things are different, you know, and if we're taking something away at the end, providing that grace to people with disabilities, then I'm just simply saying mail it out earlier. Mail it out 45 days earlier. It gives them a chance to vet the candidates and get their information and mark their ballot and put it back in the envelope. Madam Chair, I actually, and I believe, I don't know who was here to vote for it, but I actually introduced a bill that it's in current law that if your advance ballot is returned and the signature doesn't match, that the election office should try to get, confirm your signature. A lot of people with disabilities and senior citizens, their signatures have changed from when they first registered to vote. And so it's a little shaky now. And so I keep trying to do everything in my power and to make sure that we uphold democracy and the right to vote and helping our people with disabilities and seniors. That's what we're supposed to do, is help those who may not be able to just run up and down the stairs out here. They need a little help. And so that's all it does. It mails that permanent advance ballot out a little earlier.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Corson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I've been doing some research on that Mississippi case and the Fifth Circuit's holding, and I think this amendment makes a lot of sense because one of the things that's different from Mississippi law versus Kansas law is that in Mississippi, they begin to mail ballots out 40 days before the election. So what the good senator's amendment would do is actually bring us much closer in line with what Mississippi's doing, since we seem to be relying on that Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals decision to justify this change. I think the amendment makes sense to put us closer in line with what Mississippi's actual practice is. To give you a sense, for the 2024 election, Mississippi actually started mailing ballots on September 23rd, compared to when we did that in Kansas, which was only 20 days before. So if we've decided that we want to be closer to what Mississippi does, if that's a better way of administering elections, I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander, and we should adopt this amendment because that would bring us closer into conformity with Mississippi. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate this proposal and amendment from the Senator from Sedgwick, particularly because in talking with her, I learned that she did reach out to individuals and election workers in her county. So I took that opportunity to do the same in Douglas County. And I also got some information that was published in the NCSL magazine about advanced voting. So my question for the Senator from Sedgwick, would this be different from what a number of other states do if we were having those ballots mailed 45 days ahead of the election?
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Faustido.
Sorry, I'm on a roll, Madam Chair. Thank you. I apologize. No, actually, there are other states that do this: Oklahoma, New Jersey, Michigan, Louisiana, Indiana. They do this, and their elections are just fine. No one is trying to fraudulently vote. Nobody is trying to vote twice. They're just getting their advanced ballot in the mail earlier.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and I appreciate the states that the Senator mentioned. In fact, I know that there's 18. And many of the states that don't, that have 45 or longer, another 6 have 40 or longer. And in fact, many of those states that do not have that length of time to mail back your ballot are the states that provide for 10, 7, 14, 6, or the day before the canvass. So this is not unusual. I think if the interest from the legislature is in having that deadline on election day, then an extension of the time before is absolutely appropriate. That will address the issues about mailing and will give our citizens the opportunity to make sure that there's adequate time. Certainly, I recognize that our Secretary of State has suggested don't count on the mail, find a ballot box, but we have many counties that don't have a drop box or have only one, and so I think this is a very appropriate amendment. I again thank the Senator from Sedgwick for bringing it.
Seeing no other questions, Senator, you may move your amendment.
Madam Chair, again, this amendment won't cost any money. The election staff would just be mailing, doing their job they're already doing just a little bit earlier. It's similar to what we're doing in this legislative body, our 90 days. We're really narrowing it down to those days. So sometimes we come in earlier, sometimes we stay late, but it's not going to cost any additional money just to mail out earlier, Madam Chair. And all this will do, if we don't do this amendment, Senate Bill 4 will assure that some people's votes aren't counted. So if they come late in the mail, even though we pass legislation to verify that mark, and I remember when Senator Hildebrand was here, and we put a watermark on it. We did all these things. We have a voter registration card that's mailed to us. We do all these things, and it just seems like over the years, as I said, Madam Chair, I've served on the election committee for a few years, and we're just chipping away at making it harder for the senior citizens in my district, anyway, I know, they call me, and people with disabilities. I represent the Timbers facility, Madam Chair, and so many people live in little apartments, and they're in wheelchairs, and I go there, and you know, they want to vote, they want to have an input. I don't know if you guys remember David Rundle, who was wheelchair bound, but he wrote in the Wichita Eagle about voting rights all the time. And so also, Madam Chair, I'm a person that I like to go vote in person. And so, Madam Chair, when I'm leaving the voting poll, and Madam Chair, as a matter of fact, I asked this question today in the committee, but the chairman wasn't there. You know, usually the election is on my birthday, August 5th. Madam Chair, I'm like, I'm going to have a good day or a bad day, you know, so since it falls on that day. But I will go, and when I'm leaving the voting location, the voting poll in the parking lot, there are people coming in, Madam Chair, and here's what they'll say: that they requested their mail-in ballot, they were on the permanent list to receive a mail-in ballot to vote, but by election day, it still had not arrived. So then they said they wanted to vote, so they showed up at the polls anyway, and then they were directed, you know, they would say, I didn't get my mail-in ballot in the mail, and then they were directed to vote by provisional ballot. Madam Chair, I think this amendment to Senate Bill 4 would also help alleviate that concern, or part of it anyway, about people fraudulently voting or trying to vote twice. So it may look like that if you've requested your ballot, never came in the mail, then you show up at the voting location to vote. You know, it's like, okay. I think this would alleviate that problem as well, Madam Chair, and I just don't know what else to say other than this is one of the only things that, and you know, when we talk about people using the mail-in ballots, well, all of us did. When COVID was there, you know, you saw that increase of mail-in ballots. And I don't know, like I said, again, as I've done for years in this great capital of ours, I've advocated for children and seniors and people with disabilities. And again, this is just another plea to make sure that our community of people with disabilities, that their vote counts also. Madam Chair, with that, I move my amendment.
You've heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Noes have it. The motion fails. We are back on the bill. Are there additional questions for the Senator from Johnson? Senator from Finney, Senator Clifford.
I'm sorry, Madam Chair. Does the Senator from Sedgwick still have the floor, or is it my turn?
No, sir, you have the floor. Senator from Finney, Senator Clifford.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate the esteemed Senator from Sedgwick citing the efforts of veterans to protect our rights. For us veterans, we all gave some, but some gave all. So I appreciate that citation. But I'd like to talk about my own experience because I came up here from a country where a national holiday and a purple thumb indicated that you had voted. And there was actually 100% participation. Maybe we should do that, Madam Chair. But when I got here, I was disenfranchised once because as a surgeon, I didn't make it to the polling place at 7 a.m. And I had an emergency come, and I was in the operating room by 7 p.m. on election day, and I vowed I would never be disenfranchised again. So when I became a county commissioner, and we canvassed the votes for 7 years in Finney County, I did not want to disenfranchise any voter. And we tolerated some pretty shabby envelopes and smeared postmarks and the vagaries of the post office, but we really worked hard to not disenfranchise the voter. In fact, my seat was replaced when I came to the House by appointment to replace Representative Russ Jennings, the late Representative Jennings. I was appointed, and then we appointed a county commissioner in my place. But subsequently, about 11 months later, there was an election for my seat. The appointee was challenged, and the challenger won by 1 vote. So it emphasized to me and to our Finney County voters that, as a madam from Sedgwick says, you know, every vote ought to matter. I think we have very secure elections in Kansas, and I, in Fed and State this morning, thanked the Secretary of State for really empowering the county clerks and his efforts to secure elections. But being a party chair in Western Kansas, the Republican Party, I have to deal with individuals who still think there's fraud in Kansas elections. And although I would disagree with that, that perception is the reality for many voters. And I think worse than me as a surgeon being disenfranchised, taking care of a patient, dampening the turnout because the perception of fraud is even worse because it's hard for us to measure that. And maybe it's self-serving on my Republican side of the ledger, but I want to promote turnout of all voters. So I always personally vote early, and I certainly feel like we have plenty of time in Kansas in the early voting period to get out. So that would be my effort. I voted against this when I entered the House, but I have changed my mind based on that perception of fraud, and I do think we have adequate safeguards to ensure we are not disenfranchising any voter. So I will be supporting this, but I do have a question for the carrier from Johnson County. If he would, I don't want him to speculate, but I wonder if there's anyone reporting, we didn't hear at committee, but is anyone reporting that the vote is actually suppressed by perception that voting is not fair and individuals' votes, even if made, will not count?
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Thank you. And first of all, I appreciate the comments by the senator from Finney. I believe he makes some very good points. I'm not aware of anyone whose vote was actually suppressed by that, but I am aware of people who are concerned about the potential for fraud. And when you allow a deadline to slip for 2 or 3 days and the vote count changes after the election, it does give the perception that there's fraud and does undermine the confidence of the voter in future elections, and which is why I believe this is so important. And if I may, there was one comment earlier about permanently disabled people. They can apply to be on the permanent advance voting list. So they don't have to apply for an advance ballot every time. That is available to them. So we do make exceptions for those people who can't get to the polls, and we certainly want their vote. But I believe in this case, you know, setting that deadline for everyone is the right thing to do. I think it would restore confidence in the voting process. One of the things that would, so that people wouldn't have questions about what goes on after the polls have closed at 7 p.m. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, I want to say that I appreciate the senator from Sedgwick and some of her words talking about the history of this legislation. And I just want to set the record straight from some of the comments of the carrier. I was actually the Republican senator who carried this bill on the floor of the Senate when it passed 39-1. And I pulled up the minutes from that Committee on Ethics, Elections, and Local Government from January 24th, 2017. And there's nothing in the minutes talking about this was just for veterans. Every piece of testimony is talking about the issue for citizens whose mail processing centers had been moved outside of their county or outside of the state, causing delays in mail delivery. So that was in 2017, and things have honestly only gotten worse. So this is not just about our veterans. This is about making sure people who are out of state actually have the ability to vote in a timely manner. I talked about this on the floor. Both of my children chose to go to school out of state, but because they want to get Christmas presents, they make sure that they get a mail ballot. They apply for that really early so that the first day that mail ballots are sent, it comes their way. And thankful to Johnson County, I can track those and know when those ballots have been out and texting to make sure that they're checking their mail at their schools. So my youngest son, who's in school in California, his ballot was mailed on the first day, so 20 days before. It took over 2 weeks to get to his campus. The day he got his ballot, he filled it out and he ran. He was late to class because he had to go back to his dorm because the campus bookstore would not take Apple Pay, and children today do not have cash. But he was able to find some change in his car and went to buy the stamp, mailed it back exactly that day. It was delivered after Election Day. It was postmarked over a week before, but it was received after Election Day. His vote did count because it was in that 3-day grace period, and I am thankful for it. Our Secretary of State's office has even testified on this bill that says this is going to make it harder for our out-of-state college students. The good senator from Johnson last year, when I shared this story about my own kid, said he needed to be more responsible. So my options there are to buy a plane ticket so he can come and vote on Election Day or before, or he can overnight mail that. Have you all overnight mailed anything recently? I just did. I mailed something to my dad, $50. That's a hefty poll tax. So this is in place because of our mail system, and we know it takes longer. So I am in opposition to this. We need to make sure that our Kansas residents and eligible voters are able to do this. We have a lot of people who have gig work, and I am thankful for a lot of the advanced ballot through mail, voting in person, advance, but that does not work for everyone. So we have to have these options. This only counts if it is postmarked on or before 7 o'clock on Election Day. And so I urge the body to vote against this. Thank you.
Seeing no other questions, Senator, you may close.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move that when the committee rises and reports, it reports Senate Bill 4 favorably for passage.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries. We will now turn our attention to Senate Bill 6 to explain the bill. The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Senate Bill 6 very simply prohibits the use of ranked choice voting in the state of Kansas. Ranked choice voting means a form of voting that allows voters to rank 2 or more candidates for an elected office in order of preference and tabulates the cast ballots in multiple rounds with the elimination of the lowest vote receiving candidates after each round until a candidate receives a majority of the votes cast. The reason for this is that there has been a push across the country to institute ranked choice voting. We've heard recently that even Wichita is considering this. There was millions of dollars spent in 2023 leading up to the 2024 election by proponents of ranked choice voting. And I placed on your desk an example of a ranked choice voting ballot. And this is from the mayoral election in Minneapolis in 2013. And if you look at this, unlike how we vote now, you walk into the polling place, you select who you think is going to do the best job, and at the end of the day, after the election's over, whoever gets the most vote wins. In this case, on this particular singular municipal election, there are 40,495 potential combinations of candidates that you could vote for. Now, this is obviously an egregious example. However, it is an example of what happens. Ranked choice voting is extremely confusing. In New York City, I believe they spent $15 million to educate people on how to fill out the ballots. Maine had a 19-page voter guide on ranked choice voting. 11 states have already banned ranked choice voting. And if you dive into how it actually happens, the only way when you have a number of candidates to receive a majority vote is the votes have to be exhausted, meaning if you happen to vote for 3 or 4 candidates and your candidates are not among the top ranked candidates, your vote is exhausted. In other words, they take your ballot out. And so the only way to reach that majority is by eliminating ballots until you get a small enough number that one person or the other gets that majority plus one. So it actually disenfranchises people. I would think this would be a bipartisan bill because no one wants more confusion in the election process or any more erosion or corrosion of the confidence in the election process. And with that, I will stand for questions.
Are there questions for the senator from Johnson? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I do have a few questions for the senator from Johnson. He said that this means that your ballot would be thrown out or not counted. How is that different from someone who's cast a ballot for the individual that was determined not to win the election?
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Well, it's kind of a nuance, but actually when your ballot is exhausted, it is excluded then from counting. Whereas at the end of a normal election, you have, let's say, 2 candidates. They can go back and look at those ballots, and your vote for one person or the other is not exhausted. It's not thrown out. They don't call it thrown out. They call it exhausted. And if voters do not rank every available candidate in that ranking, and you take a look at that ballot that I gave you, you'd have to rank each one in order, and if you'd have to do it correctly, if their choices are eliminated before a final winner is computed, their ballots are eliminated. And with each round of elimination, it appears as fewer people voted. Roughly 140,000 ballots were exhausted in a New York City 2021 mayoral primary. So in other words, those ballots essentially do not count. In the elections with the plurality, the way we do it now, those votes count. But this would, again, I think, undermine confidence in the whole voting process.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm not sure I understood that. Again, if you are voting in a municipal election and there are 6 people on the ballot and you're allowed to vote for 3, if you didn't pick one of the top 3 winners, does that mean your vote was thrown out or it didn't count? When in fact, just like with those ballots, it's possible to go back and recreate what happened. There's a physical record.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think the senator from Douglas is making my point. Asking these questions are the same questions we would get from voters. They would have to have a voter guide to figure out whether those votes counted or not, or whether they would be quote unquote exhausted, which is what they call basically ballots that are not counted if they don't make the cut. It is extremely confusing. It's hard for me to explain clearly, whereas we can very concisely explain how we vote today. These just add more confusion because people don't understand how that process works. And if you mismark the ballot, for example, if you were to rank certain candidates on the first column because you thought I had to rank them in order on that first column, those are thrown out. Those are literally exhausted. And it transfers votes to the second and third choice. So people who you may have held your nose and voted for just because you had to rank all those candidates would end up with your votes. So you're not picking somebody who is the best choice. You're ranking people in order of who stinks the less, basically. It's just a terrible situation, terrible way to vote, and it's very hard to explain.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was serving on our Douglas County Democratic Party as a precinct person and had the opportunity to explain to a number of our party members how ranked choice voting worked when I believe it was the 2020 primary was held with mail-in ballots and ranked choice voting, and I found it pretty easy to explain to people. Those were hand tabulated, but if you have machines that tabulate ballots, has the senator from Johnson experienced filling out a ballot and maybe voting for one more individual? If you could vote for 3, you vote for 4. Has he experienced a situation where the tabulator just spits that ballot back out and says you've made a mistake and gives you a chance to vote over?
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
I have not personally had that experience. However, with regard to that and with regard to how this is tabulated, it actually creates more delays because you have to do multiple rounds by eliminating candidates as each one drops out. Sometimes those delays are long, even with tabulated ballots, and it comes with additional cost as well. So I haven't experienced that personally. I would sure that if some municipality or local government adopted that, people would have to get up to speed on how to do that. But it seems to me to be unnecessary to confuse a voting situation that's already pretty clear, pretty straightforward.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. You know, once again, because of software at this point, the tabulations can, and we heard this in testimony, that the tabulations can be done very quickly. So we did have a hearing on this bill in Federal and State Affairs, and the senator from Johnson has identified some of the concerns he had. Can he share with the full Senate some of the comments that were made in favor of allowing for ranked choice voting that were certainly part of that testimony?
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
I'd have to drag out some of that to find it, to be honest. It would take some time. I don't remember right off the top of my head. I could go in and look at some of the testimony. It would take me a few minutes if the senator absolutely must.
Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think we make our best decisions when we have made ourselves aware of what our some of the concerns and complications and what are some of the opportunities. Certainly, there are a number of municipalities and states that have adopted this kind of voting because they have constituents who feel like it really gives them a better opportunity to have perhaps a third party participate in that election process. It certainly helps determine the candidate with the strongest support, not just one or the other, but overall, what candidate may have the strongest support. And because there is that requirement for trying to reach out, there have been some reports that this actually encourages civil campaigning, that you're not just identifying one person and trying to say this is some of their weaknesses or this is what I don't agree with. There is actually that attempt to be civil during campaigning. And the proponents argue that it reduces wasted votes. I understand if the state may want to say, right now, we don't think this is appropriate. And in fact, we don't allow ranked choice voting at this point. But this bill that we have before us applies not only to our state elections, but also to federal elections, which I argue we really don't have any authority over, but also municipal elections. And local leaders have been elected to represent their communities, do the best thing, listen to their constituents. I believe we don't have the right or that it's appropriate for us to tell our municipalities how they should run their elections. Madam Chair, I am a strong no against this legislation.
Are there other questions? Senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
Thank you. I do have a question for the carrier, if you could stand for a question.
He's standing.
I believe you mentioned earlier that Maine has a 19-page voter guide. Can you tell me if that is sent out by the state or some other entity?
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
I believe it was the state of Maine actually sent it out. It might be also some of the counties. That was in testimony.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Holscher.
Thank you. Interestingly, I get emails from people who used to live in Maine who have come to Kansas indicating that they love the voter guide that is sent out by the county officials, by the state of Maine. And while it may be lengthy, the length of that guide is devoted to covering the different questions that are on the ballot, not so much ranked choice voting. So the length of that guide can depend on how many questions are on the ballot. Incidentally, just to point out, the League of Women Voters has a guide that they put out in Maine that kind of covers the same type of information. It's 1 page. So this is not a terribly difficult system to understand. Again, it can be explained and has been explained in 1 page. So I will be voting against the concept of the bill here because of those reasons. Thank you.
Other questions for the Senator from Johnson? Senator from Sedgwick, Vascato.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a quick question from the Senator from Johnson.
Yes, please proceed.
Yes. So he mentioned that he thought that Wichita was attempting to do this. Could he elaborate? Did he mean just for their local elections or for school bond election? If he would elaborate, please. Thank you.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
For that answer, I would yield to the Majority Leader, Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My understanding is the county or the city council in Wichita is in the process or have adopted an ordinance that allows the replacement of vacancies on the city council to use ranked choice voting.
Would you care to yield back?
Yes, Madam Chair. I'll yield back to Senator from Johnson.
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
No further comments. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there additional questions for the Senator from Johnson? Senator from Johnson, Senator Sykes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just want to reiterate something that the senator from Douglas said. Ranked choice voting, elections that are using ranked choice voting have been shown to be more positive and civil, and it reveals the candidate with the most support across the entire electorate, not just the passionate base. So why would we be banning this from the state of Kansas, something that I think all Kansans would like to see in our elections? Thank you.
Are there other questions for the Senator from Johnson? Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Clays.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a very interesting debate, and I mean, I'm actually quite riveted by it. I want to take us back to 2009 in Burlington, Vermont. There was a ranked choice election there. It's actually an entire Wikipedia page devoted to it. For those that have their phones out, you can type in 2009 Burlington, Vermont ranked choice, pops right up. Bob Kiss won that one. Interestingly, Bob did not have a plurality, and another candidate had a plurality, and he didn't have the majority either. And you know, it caused a lot of confusion. And I'm not going to weigh into Burlington, Vermont politics, because I know we don't care about that. But what I do care about is Kansas, and if the chair will indulge me, I would just like to walk through a quick thought experiment, if I may.
Please proceed.
So if we were to have a chili cook-off, and let's just say, for the sake of argument, that we had 5 chefs. One was named Ty, one was named Tim, one was named Karen, one was named Chase, and one was named Dinah. These shouldn't be anybody that you know, just made up names. And we had 100 attendees at this wonderful chili cook-off. And we did a ranked choice type of system, just for the sake of giving it a run and seeing how fast it is. I went ahead and put together some voter preferences, in other words, some data that throws this through. And obviously, I don't have a whiteboard here, so talking through all of it would be a gross waste of our time. So I'm going to be brief and just walk through a little bit of it. And as my good friend from Johnson pointed out, there is a ranked choice example here, so you should have an idea of what it looks like. But let's just say that 30 attendees ranked Tim's chili as number 1. 25 attendees ranked Karen's as number 1. 20 attendees ranked Dinah's as number 1. 15 for Chase and 10 for Ty. In a traditional, say a jungle primary with a runoff, then Tim and Karen would be the final 2. And using this data I have, Tim actually wins that chili cook-off. Very, very straightforward winner of that chili cook-off. As we all know, though, there are cases that, in a jungle primary where the number 1 individual, the Karen in that situation does sometimes win. So that isn't predetermined by the fact that he did win the jungle. It's just the way this data actually played out. And I wasn't trying to get the data to do anything particular there. I was trying to get it to do something else. But if you were to do a runoff election, which we're talking about, the ranked choice election, in the ranked choice election, and again, I don't want to go through all of these, but in that particular case, just to give you an example of how that would look, you have a situation in that runoff where, since I have to use their first names, it's throwing me off a little bit. Ty was the lowest voter, so you would actually take him out and you would redistribute his votes to the others, is my understanding. That's the system that I looked up here. Anyway, the end result of that, I won't walk us all through it all, other than to say, in that particular case, we have Dinah winning that runoff, which congratulations for that. But so we have two different winners, same voter preferences, by the way. Voter preferences did not change in this example. I'm using the same data set. And then I did a third one. This one's called Condorcet. Condorcet was a philosopher. I won't go into his history because nobody cares, but he came up with what's called a pairwise version of doing an election. Now, pairwise is simply this. We're just going to take each individual versus one other individual and compare their two chilies, you know. So, for example, we would take, I'll just grab one here, Ty versus Karen, right? And we would just go through and see, you know, which one of those wins. Well, you know, if you do the data, you know, 30 voters in Tim Schallenberger's group ranked Ty second, but Karen fourth. 15 voters in Chase's group ranked Ty third, but Karen fifth. 20 voters in Dinah's group had Ty third and Karen fifth. Now, anyway, you run all this data. Pairwise is a lot more complicated because you have a lot more combinations. I actually had an AI program do it for me. So, but at the end, guess who wins that one? Ty actually wins it. He had the lowest number of votes in the traditional one, and yet he wins in what's called a concordicet version of this. A senator earlier said that the ranked choice actually picks the one that has the most support. No, in a head-on-head, just taking each individual person one-on-one, he is the winner. He has the best chili. So congratulations to that fictional character, Ty, on his wonderful chili. But my point of this isn't actually to beat up on ranked choice. I'm actually showing something quite different here today. What I'm arguing here is that we have a static set of data, or voter preference, and we can stick it through 3 different equations, and I'm sure there's others out there. You know, we could argue for all kinds of different ways to do voting, and we get different answers. Now, in science, what we're taught is if that you have 3 equally compelling theories to explain a phenomenon, or 3 models that explain a phenomenon, we're to choose the one that's the simplest. You know, if you remember Sir William of Occam's razor, the simplest answer is the best answer, the most parsimonious answer. And, you know, the good senator from Johnson, I think that's the point he was simply making with this. You know, we can beat up on ranked choice, you can beat up on first past the post. I don't think you can actually beat up on Cordyceps. I actually really like it a lot. But explaining it to a voter, you know, that's the issue that we have at hand. And in my mind's eye, that's what this comes down to. It's not about one necessarily, you know, having some extreme advantage over the other. It's about fairness. And fairness isn't just about an election being fair, as another senator mentioned. It's also about the perception of fairness. And if people don't perceive it as being fair, if they don't understand it because it's complicated, then it undermines the legitimacy of everyone in this body. So with that, I yield.
Are there additional questions for Senator from Johnson? Senator from Douglas, Senator Francisco.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I think it's interesting to look at the results of what might happen, but I'm a little worried that we didn't get to taste the chili, and that in fact we were just given the numbers of how the votes played out. So I'd like a more realistic opportunity to try that out before we use that as a reason to support or not support this method of voting. Thank you.
Other questions? Senator from Johnson, Senator Gossage.
Well, that was a hard act to follow. I don't know anything about the chili cook-off, but very fascinating. I just want to ask the carrier of the bill, if I'm thinking of this correctly, sometimes people confuse ranked voting with runoffs. So a county could still have a runoff. Let's say that there are 4 or 5 people or candidates, and no one really got a majority. Somebody got 24% of the vote, and they decided they would have the first 2 candidates that had because they know how many votes they had, have a runoff. And so am I right in understanding that that is still allowed?
Senator from Johnson, Senator Thompson.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Senator from Johnson. Yes, that is correct. This does not prohibit runoff elections at all. It just prohibits ranked choice voting.
Other questions for the Senator from Johnson? Seeing none, Senator, you may close.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. Couple quick comments. Number one, if we're trying to ensure that everyone gets a vote, passing this bill to prohibit ranked choice voting ensures that, because ballots are not exhausted. People's votes are not thrown out. There was one study of ranked choice voting in Maine that found that negative spending increased significantly in states where they use ranked choice voting, primarily because if you can make another candidate look very unfavorable and you're the second or third choice, there's a chance that that vote could trickle down to you. And in fact, I would argue that in ranked choice voting situations, people who are willing to stand up and articulate a strong position on any one subject will get wiped out in favor of those who hide what they're really for, those candidates who are afraid to come out on tough subjects. And so you end up getting folks who are more linguini-spined, in my opinion. So I think that this is a good bill. I believe this protects our voting. And with that, I move that when the committee rises in a report, it reports Senate Bill 6 favorably for passage.
You have heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries. The chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I move the committee rise and report.
You've heard the motion. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Motion carries.
The clerk will read the committee report.
On motion of Senator Blasey, the Senate resolved itself into the Committee of the Whole for consideration of bills on the calendar under the heading of General Orders with Senator Erickson in the chair. Recommended Senate Bill 4 and Senate Bill 6 be passed.
Chair recognizes the senator from Sedgwick, Senator Erickson, to adopt
Thank you,
the
Mr.
report.
President. I move we adopt the committee report.
Heard the motion. All those in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, no. Report's adopted. Introduction of bills and concurrent resolutions. Clerk will read.
Senate Bill number 174 by Committee on Public Health and Welfare, an act concerning abortion. Senate Bill number 175 by the Committee on Public Health and Welfare, an act concerning health and health care. Senate Bill number 176 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning the Kansas Indoor Clear Air Act. Senate Bill number 177 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning elections. Senate Bill number 178 by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning law enforcement agencies. Senate Bill 179 by Senators Sykes and Blasey, an act concerning income taxation. Senate Bill number 180 by Senator Sykes, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure. Senate Bill number 181 by the Committee on Ways and Means, an act concerning state finances. Senate Bill number 182 by the Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance, an act concerning health insurance. Senate Bill number 183 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning crimes, punishment, and criminal procedure. Senate Bill number 184 by the Committee on Agriculture and Natural Resources, an act concerning the environment. Senate Bill number 185 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning the victims of crime. Senate Bill number 186 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning criminal procedure. Senate Bill number 187 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning children and minors. Senate Bill number 188 by the Committee on Judiciary, an act concerning criminal procedure. Senate Bill number 189 by Senators Sykes, Corson, and others, an act concerning workers' compensation. Senate Bill number 190 by Senator Haley, an act concerning property taxation. Senate Bill number 191 by Senator Haley, an act concerning municipal utilities. Senate Bill number 192 by Senator Haley, an act concerning property taxation. Senate Bill number 193 by the Committee on Public Health and Welfare, an act concerning the State Board of Pharmacy. Senate Bill number 194, by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning real property. Senate Bill number 195, by Senators Sykes, Corson, and others, an act concerning taxation. And Senate Bill number 196, by the Committee on Federal and State Affairs, an act concerning employment.
This constitutes introduction of Senate Bill 174 through 196. Reports of standing committees. Clerk will read.
Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends Senate Bill 30 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends Senate Bill 53 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends Senate Bill 84 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Judiciary recommends Senate Bill 71 be passed. Mr. President, the Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance recommends Senate Bill 22 be amended and the bill be passed as amended. Mr. President, the Committee on Financial Institutions and Insurance recommends Senate Bill 27 be amended and the bill be passed as amended.
Messages from the House. Clerk will read.
Announcing passage of House Bill 2037, the House concurs in Senate amendments to HCR 5003, House Bill number 2037, an act concerning economic development.
Please see the February 4th Journal for a notice from USD 468, Lane County, on the disposal of a school building. Before adjourning, are there announcements? Seeing none, Senator from Sedgwick, Senator Fauske-Udo.
Thank you, Mr. President. Not an announcement, but I'd like to know who the lady is sitting in the middle.
So she is from Propylon, and she is overlooking prep of the computer change. She's viewing live action. Good question. Are there any further announcements? Senator from Johnson, Senator Thomas.
Thank you, Mr. President. Colleagues from 4 to 6 tonight, Celtic Fox, the KC Chamber, and KC Civic Council will be having a little get-together, so I'd love to see everybody there. And thank you, Mr. President.
Further announcements? Seeing none, Chair recognizes Majority Leader from Sedgwick, Senator Blasey.
Thank you, Mr. President. Tomorrow, the Senate will be going on general orders again, and there'll be 2 bills above the line. Senate Bill 14, Senate Concurrent Resolution 1603. Senate Republicans will caucus in our normal room, 548 South, immediately upon adjournment today. With that, I'll yield to the Senator from Douglas.
Senator from Douglas.
Thank you, Mr. President. The Senate Democrats will caucus in our regular room, 287 North, upon adjournment. I yield back to the Senator from Sedgwick.
Senator from Sedgwick.
Thank you, Mr. President. I move the Senate adjourn until 2:30 p.m. Wednesday, February 5th, 2025.
For the motion, all those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, no. Motion carries.